Hey, morning, guys.
Hello.
Okay.
Let's wait for 2 more minutes. Hey, guys. I think we can get started. Let me ping James, but I think we can get started. Andre, would you mind to share your screen? I think the SecCom is the first item we're gonna discuss. Oh, you want me to do that? Oh, you already did.
Do you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah. Because this is the first time we discussed about SecCom in the working group meeting. So maybe like some folks do not have context on what SecCom it is. So could you make a brief introduction on this feature?
Yeah, so SecComp is a Linux specific feature which allows us to set a filter for syscalls. So basically it's to set up syscall filtering program, which is a BPF program, similar to what is used in TCP dump. You have to call seccomp system call, but it's a rather low-level API using this BPF program. So there is a library which allows us to specify syscomp filtering rules without writing a BPF program. You just call seccomp rule add with some arguments, and for example, here's a simple example where we using libseccomp set a rule for a close system call. So if a process, after loading this seccomp filtering program into the kernel, if this process calls close, then kernel will kill the process. So usually libseccomp and seccomp is used to sandbox an application as a part of sandboxing an application. It's basically a security feature, and on some Linux kernel versions, some of its system calls are not safe. You cannot use it to exploit, for example, to get more permissions or to so in order to prevent calling system calls which are not allowed in Linux, we can use seccomp to block some specific system calls which are not secure.
I have one question, which is kind of related to the action kill. So if, say, a process is killed because it calls some system call that's being disallowed, should we just kill the entire container, or we just let the process being killed silently without the whole container being teared down?
Well, so if we run a process as a container, right? If it might fork its own child processes. So if some of its child processes is killed, then I'm not sure what is default behavior for it.
Yeah, ideally, I think I want a scenario. I want I'm not sure if that's possible though. I think I want that to be similar to the case where if any of the process or any of the if the container the entire container will be teared down. Similarly, if any of the process in the container violate the seccomp rule and being killed, then I want the entire container to be killed, not just that process to be killed. Ideally, well, I don't know if that's doable.
Yeah. I'm not. I'm pretty sure that Linux kernel you cannot set a rule for child processes, so that if a child process dies, then all process trees from its parent, from its root, and all its siblings will die. I think it's impossible to set such a rule.
Is there a notification, like I get notified when the seccomp action being invoked? I think, like for example, the case, you have a notification from the C group system that you have a event FD that you get. You can read on that, and the event will be generated when there's a happen. I'm wondering if there's similar things that we can use to monitor those events and then tear down the entire container if some such events happens. If that's not possible, that's fine. I'm just asking.
Because I think it's not possible.
That doesn't sound like the behavior you want. does it? Because a lot of these system calls, you might call it, you might, accidentally call it because you call some library function which ends up in this system call, and if the system call fails, then or the system call returns eperm, that's fine, right?
You're saying like but I think the sick, like I think some of the action is like kill. I don't know what that means. Like sick action kill, is that the process being killed, or just return error? Like for example, the scmp underscore act underscore kill. What does that mean? Is that the process that issued the system call will be killed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we should move forward. I think there's just one comment. It would be nice if in the kill scenario, like it's very weird that some of the process in the container being killed, but the container is not being teared down. This is similar to like when happens. I know like in Docker that when happens that some of the random process in the container will be killed, but the entire container is not teared down. But that kind of leads to like weird behavior for the container, because like, you suddenly lose one process. I don't know if the rest will behave normally if a process is being killed in the container. This is kind of similar to that.
Yeah, I think this might be a semantics we need to discuss and define on Mesos. And on Docker side, my assumption is like given a seccomp file, any try process underneath this a Docker container, if it hits some system call which is forbidden, the try process might be killed. It should be killed, but the container process might still there. We need to do an experiment to verify that. But I think Docker did not do something special to watch the signal, and then once provide some mechanism to have like any of the try process get killed, all the other process is going to be cleaned up. So I think they just call the lead seccomp library directly. So I think we might be able to do that, but we need to do some experiments. So I think we can follow up.
Yeah, I think let's move forward. I think like just a comment. If we can do that, that would be great. If not, for example, the seccomp just simply doesn't support that doesn't support that that functionality, then I think that's fine.
Okay. So since it's implemented in Docker, there are default configuration file for seccomp in Docker exists, which can be considered as a database of seccomp rules, which is used in Docker by default. So in our case, we can use Docker seccomp config, parse it, and install all related rules. But one issue is that Docker seccomp config provides not only interface for libseccomp API, but also it includes some extra rules which are unrelated to libseccomp, like filtering exclusion or inclusion of rules depending on capabilities and architecture. Maybe it would be easier if you take a look at.
Yeah, could you show an example from GitHub link? Because I think G and James are here, so they might provide some valuable feedback on this on this pending question, because Docker second config changed at some point 2 years ago, and they introduced some inclusive and exclusive for capabilities or architectures. So just like what Andres showed on his screen. So which means like the second isolator might need to control capability, or the second isolator might need to have dependency on capability isolator.
For example, here if we launch a process container which does not have capabilities dark read search, then this rule related to open by handle at system call is not included into BPF, into results in BPF program. I mean, so currently Docker parsing this file, it applies this includes and excludes rules to check like whether to include or exclude this rule. This is called filtering rule.
Okay, so the goal there is to, seems like it's to keep apps working. So if you have the capability, then you get the system call. So that it sounds like this particular configuration is making sure that any privileges you have continue to work. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, probably CAP dark read search is not the best example. So, I mean, if we are running not without admin capabilities, on some systems we can use, for example, on some Linux kernel versions, we can use BPF or clone to get
I still got confused. What does include means here?
So if a current process has capabilities sysadmin, then it is allowed to call BPF, clone, and other system calls. So this rule will be added. For example,
I see. So basically, the rule is conditional on the capability of the process.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the use cases that James mentioned is valid. That I think it's just for some privileged process to call some system call, and you don't implement some like the rule that apply to all processes, assuming different capability. So basically, depends on the capability, you have different rules.
Yeah.
Is that okay? One question I have is that the same as the OCI standard? That I know, like OCI runtime,
No.
like, for example, RunC has a seccomp support as well. Like, what's the difference between this one and the RunC's seccomp config?
I can see in internal Docker, so open containers. I guess that this is a part of these data structures are related to OCI, right? Linux seccomp, but they don't have any declaration of capabilities, etc. So this is something. These capabilities are extension of OCI standard. It's some Docker specific feature, but
yeah, I see. It's a Docker specific feature, Okay, I see. So based on the capability of the container or the first process, it apply those rules conditionally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, there is quite a bit of rules which depends on capabilities in current default Docker config.
I can see that being useful though, depends on capability, because like imagine that you have one single profile for the entire cluster, but you have container that's running in privileged mode versus non-privileged mode. You probably want to have some rule that allow people to use BPF, all these like privileged system calls. But if you don't have such conditional rule in place, then it's very hard to have a profile that's strict enough to disallow those system calls, because you do have two close use cases.
Wait, no, I think that's, I didn't quite follow that, because if you want to allow specific system calls, then you can just specify the system calls independently of the capabilities. I think the reason you want to make it conditional on capabilities is for the use case where you want the privileges to actually work. So you want to be able to specify privileges and have the corresponding system calls automatically work, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So imagine there's only one profile in the cluster, as a default profile that every container applies. If you don't have this condition on capability, then like I don't see a reason that people can disallow BPF, because some of the privileged container wants to use BPF as a system call, and you cannot like disallow that. So that means every unprivileged container might be able to use that system call, because you allow that for containers.
So Dockers decide here they achieve fail earlier instead of fail at runtime, I guess.
But what do you mean?
So like, because they, in their second config, they allow user to include or exclude capabilities, and if the capability is not included, and then which did not satisfy the condition, and then they're gonna just fail earlier before the container launch, right? So instead, if they don't have the capability things, and then a process hit the system call during the runtime, during the container runtime, and it's gonna fail at runtime, and the process is gonna get killed. Or you don't. Maybe it does not have the privilege to make those system call. So I think there's some trade-off here. Like Docker decide this semantics to make sure the application could run well. The process with the right privilege could only make those system call, but they make the second config very complicated. Do you guys understand what I mean?
Kind of. I think let's step back. One question: is the goal of this design to support Docker style seccomp profile, or we don't have to?
So this is the biggest item NJ and myself would like to discuss with folks here, because we could definitely do that, but it might be a little complicated. We might need to introduce a lot of helper to parse the Docker specific config. And the other concern, it is like we kind of understand why they make this change to change the second config at some point, and it makes sense to make sure, like, provide some capability to make sure the listed system call could be satisfied with the correct privilege. But our concern, it is like Docker config, it is Docker specific things. They might change at some point. Docker second config, the they might change at some point, and then we need to support that corresponding whatever they change. And that's that's the biggest concern. But then the second concern it is even though their change on capability dependency makes sense, but it is a lot more complicated, and we need to implement many helpers to parse this JSON because it is not parsable by
but that's the implementation detail. Let's not trying to dive into implementation detail. Like, I think it's doable. The question is, do we want to support that semantic or not? I think that's the question.
Yeah, agree.
So I'll just inform you about what we do. What we do is we have a executor written in Go, and we we basically extracted the seccomp profile code from Docker and slammed it in. So we use the Docker seccomp profile, but we do it manually from the executor before it launches tasks.
So basically, you guys use the same profile like this.
Yeah, I think that 90% of people will just use the Docker profile because it's known to work, and honestly, most people don't care. Most people care about security and seccomp as a checkbox item. There's very few people who are going to, thoroughly analyze what their containers do and tweak things to be more secure. They're basically are largely just going to take the Docker one.
Yeah, I think that's my kind of. I'm leaning towards that too, because I think at the end of the day, if the goal is trying to move people from Docker to like Mesos containers, then whatever Docker provides, and as James mentioned, that it's very hard for them to understand those things or even modify those things, and they probably just take whatever the default that Docker provides, and then we should just provide the same behavior as we do on Mesos containers.
One use case which I think is probably realistic is if there's a kernel vulnerability, and if there's a kernel vulnerability in a specific system call, which is sort of optional for applications, then maybe you could use maybe sites would use seccomp to disable that. But I think maybe that's a narrow path because I think the last big kernel vulnerability I can remember was in wait 4, and you can't just kill apps if they call wait because everything calls wait.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Gilbert, is that? I think my bias is also like just make sure that we are compatible with Docker because that's what most people are using. And also, I think you should go back to product team. I mean, this is kind of Mesosphere internal, but you should go back to product team if the customer wants to use Docker profile or not. Are they willing to switch to a different one? You should ask.
So basically, our goal was like to support Docker specific seccomp profile. From our internal request at Mesosphere, our customer, they are using seccomp profile for Docker daemon, and they would like to use the same seccomp config profile for Mesos containers. So and when we there are some trade-off here. So we totally understand like maybe it's more than 90%. Maybe it's like 99% people who use seccomp for containers. They consume the Docker seccomp profile, and if we make it different, it's very hard for people to do migration to Mesos container. And then like people need to go deeper to understand like, oh, what this build mean, what change I should do. So that's the biggest concern for us, for MJ and myself to like discuss. But we just want to bring that up because there are some Docker specific semantic, and for example, like capabilities, which is not identical with what interface the lead seccomp provided, the lead seccomp library provided to us. So yeah, we just want to have more people involved in this discussion and make sure like people feel okay. We go to the route of like supporting Docker seccomp profile, and I think yeah, there are some obstacles, but there are some implementation detail we could figure out.
I won't be worried about the parser. That's fine. Doable. I mean, what's the main difficulty there? I'm trying to understand the difficulty there.
I think the parser might be one part, because if you introduce a lot of helper, but we can do that. We can definitely do that. Another part we need to make sure the capability dependency are handled correctly in seccomp isolator.
But that's fine, right?
Yeah, that's doable. I think the discussion here is more about like what's semantics, whether or not we want to support Docker seccomp config. That's the biggest question mark for us before this meeting.
My suggestion was let's go with whatever Docker supports.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, guys. So, Andre, do we have any other pending questions we would like to bring up for folks here? I think we have some discussion on the inheritance dependency for nested container. I think we already have some decision. Maybe we should let other people know.
Oh yeah. So if a framework launches a nested container and specifies seccomp profile, it can specify a seccomp profile which differs from a parent's one. Like parent might run some seccomp profile 1 while it's nested, nested container might be launched with a seccomp profile 2. And but if framework does not specify seccomp profile for a nested container, then seccomp profile will be inherited from its parent. And currently, we can store seccomp profile which was parsed from JSON to protobuf. It is a part of container launch info protobuf. So for each container, we store this protobuf on disk. That guarantees that parents and child's container will always have the same seccomp profile. So there is two cases when framework specifies nested container. It is it's okay, it's allowed, and when it does not, then it inherits from its parent.
So basically, you mean like we don't have inheritance?
Yes.
So nested containers seccomp profile might be irrelevant to the parent container seccomp profile.
Correct.
Okay, that sounds fine.
So
that implies that a nested container might have like more permissive seccomp profile.
That's fine. We can leave that to authorization.
Yeah, I think we spent a relative amount of time to discuss about the nested container inheritance semantics, and then we realized that like if we really want to support inheritance, it might be a lot more complicated. We need to checkpoint a lot of information, and we decide to like basically we can regard nested container and parent. They share C groups, but seccomp is not kind of C groups or namespace. So it is some security control by the operator or from the user. So we will leave it over to user and operator to specify, to provide a seccomp profile, and then have them have the framework to define like what's the right semantics for those parent containers and child container to with stricter or less stricter seccomp divided. So that could be controlled by framework. We will just expose the API, and Mesos will not control the inheritance.
So how does the framework specify which seccomp profile you want to use?
I think it will be the next topic Andrew is going to show.
Okay.
There are two ways to specify seccomp profile. You can specify it at agent level. You have to specify seccomp default profile flag, which is a name of a profile, and seccomp profiles dir.
Oh, this is
specifies a directory. Yep.
I mean, you probably want to use underscore here.
Ah, okay. All right.
Yeah, this is not standard. I think standard Unix is using dash, not using underscore. But somehow Mesos flag is like underscores.
Okay, so second option is when a framework wants to launch a container with a specified seccomp profile. Here is a new protobuf, seccomp info, where you can specify profile name. It's just a name of profile. It's not an absolute path to a file pass to a file containing seccomp profile, and it's included into Linux info, which is might be a part of container info or task info. So when a Mesos agent launches a container, Linux seccomp isolator in prepare phase checks if seccomp is defined in this protobuf. So we can override default agent's seccomp profile by specifying it in protobuf per each container.
Yeah, so this is the step 2 we're gonna support for the seccomp feature on Mesos containerizer. So basically we're gonna implement the seccomp isolator first, and then we just for MVP we're gonna finish the default seccomp profile for the cluster while seccomp so it's the same for all containers. And for the API, we're gonna make it as a phase 2. And for phase 3, I think we might have some idea like to introduce a new agent API for seccomp config management. So do you guys have any question or opinion on this framework API?
So how can the framework discover what are the profile name they can use?
That's a good question. I think
I think that the idea is similar to what is used on some isolator. What was it? CNI,
yeah, I think
this
is similar to CNI, that you don't even know what the network you can use. You just know, I think like by convention. The answer is by convention, and the communication is out of band to the framework author.
Okay, so if the agent doesn't have that second profile, we just fail the task or something?
Yeah, I imagine that this should, the config should be homogeneous, that you deploy the same name to every single host.
I
So
see.
that you don't have this issue.
I see. Okay.
So in the case, I think the common case is going to be homogeneous deployment, in which case, do you really need the agent APIs to deploy the profiles? Because I mean, most people who are, if you're doing this, I guess my expectation was mostly you would slam it out with or whatever you're using.
So sorry, James. What's the suggestion?
If our expectation is that the profiles are homogeneous across the cluster, why are we proposing there to be a agent API to add and remove profiles?
Well, currently in Kubernetes, we can specify SecComp profile at the cluster level, at pod level, and at container level.
I think that's not James' question. I think James' question is like regarding the agent API to add a profile name to config mapping. If you assume that's homogeneous, why do we need that API? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's my question. Because
Yeah.
having a per agent API sort of implies or encourages you to do things differently on different agents, but then that doesn't feel like it's going to be a good experience.
So your worry is like someone called agent API for one particular agent to add a profile name called foo, but not doing like the same for the rest of the agent. Then we end up in a state where like some agent has this profile foo, but some agent don't, and then the framework cannot use the profile name foo because it's not homogeneous.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you can argue that you have some out of band way of knowing that, but if you
I think like
once you're out of band, you might as well be out of band the whole way, right?
Yeah, I think we don't need to introduce that agent API right now, Gilbert. I haven't looked at the design doc, but is there some section discussing that API?
Basically, I think the discussion of the agent API it is still not accomplished yet because it is not the highest priority for us. We're gonna focus on the MVP phase 1, as I mentioned. So even in MVP, we will not support the framework API as well. So we could keep those as an open question and continue to investigate. So
I feel like the agent API is the lowest priority compared to the rest.
Yeah, correct.
Having a config term makes total sense, and they can just assume it's homogeneous and the agent has the same config in the directory config term.
Yeah, that's how we define it on the priority. Like the agent API will be the lowest one. We may not do it in near term, but we would like to bring them up in the design doc. And if any company or any user has strong interest on the agent API, we can pick it up from there and continue. So I have another item we'd like to discuss with you guys.
Can I raise a question?
Yeah.
So if we don't want to introduce the agent API for now, should we have this config dir or just a config file that have all the profiles?
I think it is good. I think it's orthogonal. We could still have the config dir, and then on the framework API, user gonna just define the name instead of the long things.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
I think this config dir is definitely nicer, and people just can have one file per profile.
Yeah.
This is similar to CNI config too.
I see.
Make it more consistent.
Yeah, I'm config there as well.
So another item I would like to discuss with you guys, maybe like just a couple of minutes. It is about the for framework API. it will rely on an agent flag to specify what's the config there, the second profiles there. So here in the design doc, we make it seccomp specific. But in the future, as far as I can tell, for other Linux security features like AdArmor, SE Linux, so they all have their configuration. They all have the config file to parse into mesos to concern. So which means should we consider to make all the Linux security specific config into one single directory by introduce a general agent flag like Linux security there, and then underneath it has different directories, subdirectory for SE Linux, AdArmor, seccomp. So that's gonna be the default seccomp profile there. So
okay, I think it's now not necessary. You can always do that in the operator level. You have different flags, different config dir flags, and then when operator have their own script setting up the cluster, they can say, hey, it's all under the same directory. That's totally fine.
Yeah, they can definitely do that. I just bring it up to see like if it looks more graceful if we put all the security config under this using the same agent flag. So we can avoid introduce more agent flag, and I think this might be related to what Kubernetes currently does. So NJ, I forget. Could you remind me like what's the semantics on Kubernetes side? Do they have a general security flag, or they provide like separate config flag for different security feature?
I think they have on the API level, they have a call security context, something like this.
Yeah.
Is that the thing that you guys are mentioning? Is that the reason you guys bring this up? Because they have all the security related stuff in the API level under one single struct.
Yeah, correct. But it is not the same. It is not the same. It is just related.
Not the same.
It's more about the config management.
Yeah, but to me, this is like API. Like they just group a bunch of related stuff into one single API, kind of API struct, kind of. It's similar to like we'll group all the Linux specific things under Linux info. I would say this is similar to this. So if you want to say you want to be consistent with what they're doing, like one way to do that is to group all the security related stuff under Linux, like have a like security info under Linux info. But I don't think that's necessary. I think this just I don't see a strong motivation why they want to do this. It just looks nicer in the API level, but these are separate things.
Yeah. I think this could be we could introduce different flag for different features, and have the lift it over to the framework to control it.
I think that I don't think that's a strong requirement to do so.
Yep. We still have. I think that's it. NJ, do you have any other pending questions?
No.
Okay, so we are good to go. We still have like 9 minutes. So James, do you want to continue?
Sure. This should be super quick. I think the API's proposal is fairly straightforward. So the goal here is for a scheduler to be able to specify that a particular device or devices should be made available in a container for a task. Currently, you can specify that a device can be made available in all containers. So this would allow you to make devices available in the specific containers. So we're just reusing the device whitelist message to go into Linux info, and that triggers the devices isolator. I think the only main issue that we probably would like to discuss is the 1G raises about how do you know devices are actually there, and this is pretty strongly related to the discussion we just had about how do you know about seccomp profiles, is that if you're either homogeneous, in which case they're there by definition, or you have some undefined out-of-band way. I don't really think we should get into, or at least I don't have a proposal for getting into, device discovery.
Then we get into this like UDEV thing that like you have some special rule applied to some of the whatever, basically that UDEV rules that allow you to use the same name if the label. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just too complicated. I think maybe this is fine for now.
I mean, my use case is dev KVM, which is everywhere.
Which is pretty standard.
Yeah, I can imagine other use cases could be if you wanted to run some storage service and specifically map in specific block devices. But I think the problem of trying to generically publish the set of devices available on an agent seems.
So one hypothetical use case is like, for example, like I want to allow access to all the block devices that use iSCSI or that has a vendor label, have something like have a specific vendor label, something like this. But I think this is too hypothetical. I don't have a concrete use case for that one.
But that can be managed by resources, right? Like we can use offers to broadcast what's available there.
Yeah, for block device, sure, we can model those as like raw block devices as the resources. But I think like what if like I have some other devices that has nothing to do with. Yeah, I think ultimately like my feeling is like if we can model those devices as resources, that might be a more.
But I feel like some of the devices are like just shared.
Like dev KVM, yeah.
Yeah.
Or devlog, whatever. Well, devlog is.
So maybe a possible way is add additional agent-related info about devices in the offer that are not part of the resources. I don't know. Or like API that can query what devices are there on the agent.
But that's too complicated. It's very specific to Linux, first of all.
I see.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I think
there's also, I guess, in theory at least, the device might not be populated. So I can imagine a case where you can create the device, but it's not actually present on the host yet. Like there's no device. You can imagine that there's no device node on the host, but some hardware is physically attached. So once you create the device node, you can access it. But knowing that it's there in the first place would require you to traverse sysfs somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think this is just like a comment, not like an objection. I think this is fine. Are you gonna do that soon, James?
I was, but now I don't know. So I have to. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Since like we don't have any objection on this proposal, should be straightforward. I think I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think sorry. Thank you for scrolling down to the authorization. There probably, I think this is something where I hoped to engage Alexander Rojas a bit, and I did briefly chat to him. We can add ACLs for it, but there doesn't seem to be like we've had an authorization, point for it, but there doesn't seem to be a way to really express it in the default authorizer ACL format.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, for us, it's not an issue because we have our own authorizer that we can always do something like this and come up with our own ACLs. Yeah, the default ACL that Mesos has right now is, it's pretty hard to.
And I think it seems like there's a number of cases where there's authorizable actions that can't be expressed in that ACL.
I mean, one idea is you can allow those echoes to you can have some echoes that only supports none or any, not some.
Yeah, actually, supporting none or any might be might be an interesting idea. That would be at least. I think
That's what we do for many other stuff.
Yeah,
Default.
none or any is probably better than nothing.
Yeah. So I think that can avoid like us specifying the kind of what I call object in the ACL, and we don't know exactly what the object should be.
Yeah, because I can definitely see that you could default to none and have specific principles allow
to any, yeah,
to make
like
any.
to any.
I mean, that's not all the configs, but it's a useful config.
Right.
Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. I think, did I get disconnected? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so
I can hear you too.
yeah, I think that's it for the meeting. Thank you guys for joining, and I will see you guys 2 weeks later.
See you.
Thanks, bye.
See you.
See you.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks.